Hello and welcome to another episode of Filmy Manager. And kicking off the new year, just wishing everyone a wonderful 2021. Hopefully, 2020 was a pretty hard year for humanity in general. And here's hoping that 21 is a little bit better. One of the things that 2020 threw a spotlight on, among many things, is the aspect of mental health. As people changed the way they lived, the way they worked, the way they interacted with each other, there was a lot of focus on how they coped with these changes in their lives, and there were a lot of discussions on the importance of taking care of one's mental well-being apart from other aspects of one's life. So this episode will focus on exactly that, on why mental health is important and why and how one can actually seek help and how that works. And as always on this podcast, we'll look at the framework of a movie to sort of understand this. And the movie we'll be analyzing is Dear Zindagi. This was, I think, a landmark film, in my opinion, on this particular topic that came out a few years ago. It was made by Gauri Shinde and starred Shah Rukh Khan and Alia Bhatt. And it talks about a young working professional, Kyra, who's struggling with issues and how she sort of copes with those issues by actually seeking help and then getting some clarity. But instead of me talking about this on my own, I wanted to bring in someone who is in the field of mental health. So I wanted to welcome to the podcast all the way from Melbourne in Australia, Vinay Nair. Vinay is someone that I've known for a long time. We went to engineering school together. But since then, Vinay has actually sort of found his calling and his passion in the area of mental health and well-being, and has worked with several people, individuals, and groups in order to help them to cope with various challenges in the area of mental health. So, without much ado, I wanted to invite you, Vinay, welcome you to the show, and maybe you can give our listeners a brief about yourself so that they know you.
Hi, Srinivas. I'm pleased to be here. It's I'm really excited to have this opportunity to actually dissect a Bollywood movie that you know that I really liked, but also from the lens of what a mental health professional would be looking at. So yeah, hi to all of you listeners. Really pleased to be here. My my background is that I came out to Australia around in 2003 to study IT, like most students who finish their computer science bachelor's degree. And in the next couple of years, being out here in a new country, going through the different experiences made me start to look at my life in a bit of a different way. And I decided to pursue one of the things that I was good at that point is either writing software or talking to people about how to use that software, right? And I was getting more feedback from people who enjoyed having the conversation with me, so I decided to pursue that. Signed on for a course in counseling, and then here I am, 12 years later, giving you my so-called professional opinion on what mental health is not. So yeah, I do a lot of different things. I sometimes do some ad hoc counseling, but more so I tend to bring a lot of my um, learnings from my counseling experience, and also the education, because it was a very experiential course. It was not a theory based exam. It was we were trying out some of these beliefs and values and changing of systems and whatnot in our own lives through this process. So it's impacted on my life, and I see a lot of what I've been through in the story of Kyra in today's movie. So yeah, so thank you for being here, Philip.
Great. Yeah, I mean, we look forward to learning from you. So let's jump in right in, Vinay. So the movie starts off, Dear Zindagi starts off, and we get this glimpse into Kaira's current situation, her life, her work, her relationships, her family. And I'll probably ask you a pointed question. I think she uses this line saying, I'm okay. There's some she's going through something and she tells herself, I'm okay. So is I am okay the biggest lie in human history, you think?
You know, I'm okay is something that people, want because our brains want certainty, right? Our brains struggle with the fact when life is not certain, just like how we've seen in 2020. So, it is usually we look for that from others, but in her case, it is pretty clear that she's kind of, relying just on herself, which is why we see her going through this process. And I think a lot of people, they wake up in the morning, look in the mirror and say, and try to say, I'm okay. Some people are able to be honest with themselves, and others will sometimes fake it till they can try and make it. And that's where we have to try and, figure out, I guess,
Yeah.
whether we're moving forward or not.
So what were some of your observations on Kyra's life in that first part, or let's say first 30% of the movie, where we are shown some of the challenges that she's dealing with? What are some of the things that stood out for you?
I mean, on the, at the outset or on the peripheral vision, it looks like she's aspiring cinematographer. She's also ambitious. She's also, someone who enjoys her work. She comes up with some creative ideas in her work she does. But also sometimes we see a sense of her not trusting the process, or maybe her not believing that she's got to where she's got to because, of, I guess, some other reasons, maybe gender-based, whatnot, through that
Hmm.
process. So I think we see a person who is, who's putting on a mask to face
Yeah.
the external world, but internally there are very few people who actually see her for who she is. Maybe, for example, her few close friends and also her housemate. She seems to be,
Yeah.
quite very well in tune in how
Hmm.
she's feeling. So, I think that kind of, distinction is what I was taking away from it, which is quite common in today's world.
Yeah, for sure. And also some of the things that you observe about her life. A lot of times we tend to look at our challenges, the ones that we actually face on the outside, and sort of confuse them for the actual problem. So would you characterize her challenges with, let's say, her parents or her relationships more as symptoms, or how does how do you see that?
Yeah, so we see a range of different, I guess, problems showing up in her life. First and foremost, not being able to connect with her parents, and also, her, uh, you see her having a bit of a fling with someone on the set,
Yeah.
and you start to think that, is she being unfaithful for a reason, or is there a story behind this? And
Mm.
she's thinking about that. So uh, the people, when people are seeing you from, from a different perspective, or often our colleagues and, people who might just know us as acquaintances, they often see a version of you that is, that from their view it looks like it is problematic. And the real problem really is arising from something deep down inside, a lack of
Yeah.
her not feeling good enough, or her lack of feeling abandoned, or her lack of, that if I trust this person, am I gonna fail again, right? A fear of
Mm.
failure often, and that comes out as anger, sadness, sometimes, making decisions that are not in line with the values, for example, having the
Yeah.
fling, or even just avoiding things.
Right. Yeah, I think you touched upon an important two important points. I think one is a kind of, she's always somebody who seems to be, no, she doesn't seem to be committing to things. She seems to be unsure, and she seems to be afraid of something, and that's something that's those are some of the traits that come out in that first, let's say, 20-30% of the movie.
Yeah, and we
And
you see
then
that often.
you
Yeah,
can see that she is troubled. Yeah,
go on.
go ahead. Yeah. So one thing is that when you notice that she is troubled, she's also I think looking for an answer, and I think Gauri Shinde, I think, sets it up very nicely, because she first shows us Kyra's life. And what's really interesting in this is that we think of mental health as of course, the old stereotypes, right? Like the person is not functional at all. And here you have a person who's fully functional. She's capable, she's talented, she's a climber, she's working and producing and creating. She's got an active life. It's not that she's sort of chained somewhere in some room or
Mm-hmm.
something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this sort of a dichotomy between the way the outside and the inside.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
think that was one thing that stood out for me as well.
Mm-hmm. And
The
the
way her life
uh,
was projected.
yeah, yeah. So there's also the concept of independence, right? As you were talking about the the breakdown, I was like, there's a clear, the director is able to clearly indicate that there's a feeling that there's a lack of connection with her within, right? She,
Exactly.
and she's using it, she's escaping, sometimes numbing, to cope with, not knowing what to do with it. She's in a bit of a flux.
Right. And there was one interesting exchange that she had with one of her colleagues, and I think that's what the movie it sets up the act to, if you will, where she realizes that one of her colleagues is seeing a shrink, and he is gay. So she talks to him and says, "Hey, so are you seeing a shrink because you want to tell your parents that you're gay?" And he turns around and tells her that, "No, I'm seeing a shrink because I want to tell myself that I'm a gay. I'm gay." So that really. What did you think about that kind of perspective? Because it's so much about our lives, professional and personal, is about um, you know
Self-acceptance.
acceptance from others. But the point is that unless we look within and accept ourselves for the way we are, it's going to be very hard, and you're always going to be relying on what someone else thinks of you.
Yeah.
uh, do you see that often in in your work and
Yeah.
the people
So,
that you interact with?
the unfortunate thing about self-acceptance is that it is formed in early childhood based around how your interaction with others goes, right? And that's what I think this movie is trying to set up really well. Self-acceptance is a really big topic. If you go on YouTube, if you type in affirmations, all of those meditations are around self-acceptance. And this is something that we'll unpack, but it is it's a core concept which I think is being shown that people can be successful on the exterior, they can have a level of success, but self-acceptance can still be a distant dream for someone
Yeah,
who has everything on the outside. So if you're often a family member or someone who cares for this person, you'll really want to quickly jump in and try to sympathize with this person, or even try to say, no, 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 it's all fine, don't look at life as being half empty, look at it as being half full. But that's not what
yeah,
self-acceptance is. Self-acceptance is being able to sit with someone's emotion, and you can see that really well, where she shows frustration in the supermarket where she breaks those jars. Then when someone
yeah,
asks, I think it's a housemaid, when she asks, what's happening, she starts picking up a chili and eats it, and then she
yeah,
uses that as a way of saying, oh, I'm tearful because of the chilies. So there's a
yeah,
clear
yeah.
disconnect between showing emotion and and a sense of connection. So yeah, that's a real clear indicator that I look for when I'm speaking with anyone. And again, it does not mean that we have to diagnose people. It just means that
Yeah.
it gives anyone who cares for this person an opportunity to connect.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think what sets up the last part of the movie, the last 30% of the movie is, she stumbles upon this conference. She's working at a hotel shooting a video, and she stumbles upon this conference on mental health where there's a panel of psychologists and psychiatrists. And I think each of them is giving this very deep technical view of mental health. And she is like, "Oh man, I can't. I'm just zoning out." And then the last person on the panel is Shah Rukh Khan's character, Jahangir Khan, or Jug as he calls himself. And he sort of simplifies it. I think someone asked him that, what does crazy
Yeah,
mean? Right. And
yeah,
he could have given a very technical, psychologist answer, but he just simplifies it and says that it's just a matter of, it depends on who is looking at you and from what lens?
So the
And he
context.
says that if the context, right? So he says that if I'm in this panel and I'm all of you are wearing formal clothes and I'm in torn jeans and a t-shirt, you might think I'm crazy, but someone else might say I might just think that I need a better stylist, or I might need a better sense of style. So that sort of warms her up, and in the very next scene you see that she's, this girl who's so hesitant to, sort of explore herself. She's already taken an appointment, she's already sitting in his office. So do you think that there is a need to sort of demystify this whole thing about seeking help?
Yeah.
And they call it Dimaka doctor and all this in this movie,
Yeah.
but it's really about just going and talking to someone, isn't it?
Yeah. You just before she meets SRK2, there's another symptom there where she says that she's missing sleep. Okay, that's
Yeah,
often
yeah,
another thing. Again, people will often start to, when you're missing sleep, you can either go to a standard doctor, or you
yeah.
can stop and pause and go to a Dimaka doctor, right? So
Dimaka, yeah,
there's a clear distinction that, again, that's again self-awareness. So before self-acceptance is also self-awareness, right? And
mm,
what Isake is doing there is, he's taking his coat off of being a professional and telling people
mm,
that, even though mental health came from the whole aspect of, being people being prisoned, and then people going into an asylum, and then people starting to slowly being released into the community, and people with mental health being violent and whatnot because of the information that's shared on media. It has become a concept that's quite a bit of a taboo. But really, what I have
yeah,
been noticing with my life and with the people I've been helping is that when we start to ignore those signs that tell us that, there's something amiss in our life, like, for example, lack of sleep, lack of appetite, having, arguments with others, that's an opportunity for us to go and get help before we start to go crazy in the eyes of this society, right?
yeah. That's a great point. Yeah,
It's something that needs to be flipped around, and I think she's trying to get that point across in a very nice and gentle way, which is why when she walks into the office, she feels a lot more comfortable, because she knows he himself was not, ready to be judged, or he himself, was not giving his opinion from a place of authority, but from a
yeah.
point of a
He
human
wasn't
being.
talking down to her. Yeah,
Correct.
absolutely. He wasn't on a pedestal trying to tell her that, look, this is what is wrong with you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So that authority can, letting go of authority can often help a person connect. I think that's what I took away as a profession from that particular scene.
that's a great point. And of course, then the movie sort of focuses on the actual process of therapy. And there too, I think, let's say, okay, she's taken this decision to go and seek help, which is fantastic. But in that first session, when she's talking to Jug, again, she's not ready to be vulnerable in front of him, right? So she says that I'm not getting sleep because I'm worried about a friend who's going through this problem. And of course, he's a perceptive character, so he knows that she's actually talking about herself. How big, how big of an adjustment is that, or a preparation for ourselves is that? Let's say we're going to seek help, you know, and we have to be. I mean, do we have to really work on ourselves to be prepared to open up, because something that we've never done in our life, in front, maybe just in front of a mirror, but not in front of anyone else? How hard is it?
I definitely do recommend that, people, not practice it. This is not a test. It is a,
Hmm.
in neither did the therapist or the client know where this is going to go, right? So that's why, the therapist, he's got a few things up his sleeve. He uses humor early on. He talks about what is happening in your life currently. He looks for any transitions. So she's just changed her job, she's come to Goa, she doesn't do this often. So he starts to tap into those things. And often, we you know the way we feel about ourselves is how we respond to life transitions. For example, if someone is losing a job or whatnot, um the way some people will say, so what, I'll go and get another job. Other people will go into some state of sadness and so on. So
Yeah.
that really plays a part in that. And also that I would encourage you to encourage your listeners to have some form of a journal where they can at least jot some few points down on what is
Mm,
actually causing them grief in their life. It doesn't have to be,
yeah,
something big. It can be something small, because our problems have to be definitely looked in our context, not in view of someone else. Okay, if I don't, if I'm not having a happy relationship with my life, and if I turn around to myself, I say, at least I have food in my life compared to someone else out there who doesn't have food. It's not comparing apples to apples. It's
yeah,
and often I see people distract themselves by focusing on that at least they have something. When you start with the word at least, it's not empathy, it's sympathy. So that's a really good
that's right.
perspective. And I think, if people look up a person by the name of Brené Brown on YouTube, they'll find information about vulnerability. Right, vulnerability is not something that comes naturally,
Hmm.
and he is using humor to encourage her to be vulnerable, and he's letting her, talk about her friend and externalize her problem, because he understands that vulnerability is a scary thing for people. So, if you do that in front of a mirror, you might feel vulnerable, but you might step out of the mirror, and then you might come across someone who is not willing to be supportive of your vulnerability. It might be a person who's just going about their day-to-day tasks. That's why,
Yeah,
trying to practice that vulnerability in this in
that's right.
this in the with a therapist is often helpful.
That's a great point, and I think he sort of encourages her to open up with a little bit of humor, and then he tackles this sort of problem that she's having with relationships. I think she feels that she is she's had a few relationships, so she feels that society is already judging her. And I know he tells her, he uses the metaphor or the analogy of buying a chair, and or buying anything for that matter. Aren't you going to try a few things before you actually commit to it? And she sees that she's it's sort of it's taking a load off her. Like what you see in that last 30% is that of the movie is that this girl who feels so burdened by her own mind and thoughts is slowly feeling lighter and lighter and lighter. Uh, and uh, I think the impact of that is also seen in the fact that she's able to even tell her parents what she thinks of them, not in a direct way, but I think it sort of she erupts during a get together for her brother, and she tells her parents that, and I think that's the first time we get a glimpse into the actual core issue, the unresolved trauma in a way in her life, which is about her being abandoned by her parents. I mean, that's the way she sees it, that she was abandoned. She was kept in her grandparents' house while her parents lived in a different country for a year trying to set up a business. And I think it sort of comes into that. So maybe we'll spend a little bit of time talking about that aspect and the sort of the child parent relationship.